An amber warning covers the rest of England, all of Wales and southern Scotland. Temperatures have still been recorded in the 30s across all the UK nations, much higher than would normally be expected at this time of year. And Santon Downham in Suffolk saw the highest temperature at 38.1 degrees Celsius. Our correspondent Daniela Ralph has the latest.
Keeping cool any way possible. Normal, everyday life has had its challenges today. In central London, some still braved an open-top bus tour, while others cope with the intense city heat in a more traditional way.
We've had ice pops, we've had ice creams, we've had slushies, we've had smoothies, so we've had food drinks.
We've just taken on plenty of water, staying in the shade as much as we can, and just making sure to keep it, and having to be keeping the fluids up. So
we live in America, so this is pretty normal for us. So we are actually laughing about how big a deal it is here.
But it was a big deal if you were flying into or out of Luton Airport this afternoon. The high temperatures caused a defect on the runway and all flights were suspended. Engineers are currently trying to fix the problem. Once flights resume, passengers will be able to look down at the parched landscape that makes up much of southern and eastern England. Cambridgeshire looking especially dry and brittle as the county records some of the highest temperatures.
We are actually still seeing temperatures coming in over 38 degrees. We don't know if we've broken the all-time UK record or not because the data is still coming in, but if we haven't, we've got very close.
But for so many today, the usual routine has continued, with some alterations. This building site in Dagenham in Essex has changed its schedule. No more than 45 minutes outside before you swap with a team working inside.
Over in the Middle East, whether that be Dubai or anyone else, buildings are built. No one stops because of the sun. If anything, we'd rather work in these conditions than when it's raining.
And did you ever think, I'm not working today?
And we gave the option for people not to work and not to come in this week and next week. And everybody said, no, of course not. The weather's not going to phase us. Building work still has to happen and it's not going to make a difference. So here we are.
Taking it easy and keeping cool, the orangutans at Twycross Zoo in Leicestershire probably have the right idea, as we all try to find our own way of managing in these excessive temperatures. Daniela Ralph, BBC News, Dagenham.
Well, ice lollies have been on the menu for school children and polar bears, as places as varied as schools, care homes and zoos cope with the sweltering weather. Our North of England correspondent Danny Savage is in the centre of Doncaster this evening, and he's looking pretty parched behind you, Danny.
Yeah, it's everywhere. As the grass is brown, it's very dusty. Weeks of dry weather are now being followed by 2 days of intense heat. At lunchtime today, Fiona, the airport just outside the city here, Doncaster, and also RAF Cranwell in the south of Lincolnshire were already topping out at 32 degrees. That was before the heat of the day built. And people have been listening to the messages there. We've been talking to various people around this area today. They've listened to the messages and they've adapted their routines, and we've been seeing what they're doing.
Right, year 4, it is our first break time of the day. We are going to go outside and enjoy.
At this primary school in Doncaster, things were looking up for year 4 this morning.
Much needed ice pops.
An early break outside, but with some restrictions. On the parched grass, they had to stay in the shade. No running around.
I understand it. If we're running around in the sun, then we might actually get poorly, or we might get sunburnt and it might hurt us.
You can tell there's been a lack of rain. At lunchtime we're going to keep the children in all together because obviously it's midday, the sun's at its hottest, and we think it's safer for them just to stay inside at that point. But it's quite nice getting out for some outdoor learning as well this morning in the shade.
At Thornhill House Care Home near Barnsley, they were doing everything they could to keep the residents cool and safe. There were drinks everywhere, along with more ice lollies and salad on the menu rather than cooked meals.
The residents have said they want more salads and things like that over the next day or two. Is that a good thing, working in a kitchen, a bit less heat?
Well, yeah, because you've not got to have cooker on in these degrees. So, yeah, that's good that they want salad, yeah. Healthy as well.
But convincing the elderly to stay indoors isn't always easy.
Some of them can be quite stubborn, but in the end, like, they know we're doing it for what's best for them, and they do listen. They're good. Bless them.
By lunchtime, Doncaster was one of the hottest places in the north of England.
The local wildlife park had closed to all visitors so they could concentrate on animal welfare, like chucking ice cubes to the polar bears.
The bears, they're sort of like primary concern in this heat. You know, want to make sure that everyone's as safe as possible, and the decision was for the safety of the workers here today, the public, and, you know, our animals. We want to make sure everyone's staying safe.
As the heat built, trains were ordered to go slow, 20 miles per hour in places in Yorkshire.
This is the East Coast Main Line at Doncaster, and this train is heading north to Inverness, already running about an hour late because of speed restrictions. And tomorrow, with the temperatures forecast to be even hotter, LNER are running no services on the East Coast Main Line, south of Leeds and York.
There's already been a record number of wildfires in England and Wales this summer. This one near Wakefield added to the total this afternoon. Danny Savage, BBC News, Doncaster.
A 16-year-old boy has become the fourth person to drown in open water after getting into difficulty in water in Berkshire. Thames Valley Police say the teenager was found in Bray Lake near Maidenhead. The emergency services have issued urgent appeals for people to stay out of waterways and reservoirs. It's not a good day to be travelling by train in England and Wales, with entire lines cancelled, and many others running reduced or slower services. And as we've heard, the runway has melted at Brize Norton and has been affected by what's been called a heat defect at Luton Airport. We'll get the latest from there and John Ironmonger in a moment. But first, let's talk to our transport correspondent, Katie Austin, who's at King's Cross Station. And it's looking pretty quiet there, Katie.
Yes, plenty of delays and cancellations around today, including lots on the board behind me. Passengers have been told not to travel by train today unless absolutely necessary. There are reduced timetables in operation and there are speed restrictions enforced to try and prevent the track buckling and damage being caused to overhead lines. That's basically because the railway isn't really designed for the heat we are now seeing. Now, across major stations, there are about 20% fewer passengers going through today than normal, but it seems not everyone has heeded the warning not to take the train unless necessary, with some services to the coast really full, and that means those people are now going to get stuck in delays and disruption that have built up as the day goes on as they try to get home. Now, tomorrow it's a similar story. Speed restrictions in operation across the country, but the East Coast Main Line is going to be particularly affected, and that's because its infrastructure is particularly susceptible to the heat, and there will be no trains running from here at King's Cross up towards York and to Leeds.
And John, you're at Luton Airport for us this evening. There's been a change in the situation there just in the last couple of minutes. Some flights are now taking off.
Yes, some flights now taking off, but arrivals still suspended as we know it. It was extraordinary. It got so hot on the runway this afternoon, we understand, that basically the tarmac just broke apart, and that's caused all sorts of disruption to flights this evening. And at one of the busiest times of year for the airports too, as schools break up for the summer holidays. There have been people on Twitter saying that they're stuck in a plane on the tarmac in Alicante and Benidorm, waiting to get back to the UK, but they're delayed, of course. EasyJet says all flights to Belfast, Milan and Palma are unable to operate too. Now, Luton Airport has apologised for the inconvenience caused, and it provided a short statement earlier saying that following today's high temperatures, a defect was identified on the runway. The runway has now reopened, we understand, but it's more evidence, in case you needed it, really, that the UK is not quite prepared for temperatures like these.
John Ironmonger and Katie Austin, thank you both. Health officials say the heat has put extra pressure on hospitals, but so far they are coping. Some older hospitals have taken the decision to cancel routine outpatient appointments and non-urgent surgeries because of the very high temperatures in operating theatres. Our health editor Hugh Pym has spent the day at one hospital in South London.
A memorable day for Cade in Cavorn, not just because baby daughter Adea had arrived. Born this morning in a heat wave, they brought in their own fans to try to keep cool.
I had my mum fanning me with a handheld fan. I had my husband holding the fan right up to my face because I was sweating as I was pushing. So it's a lot of adjustments we've had to make, but we've made it.
Keeping the
fantastic. And we're going to go in the ward now, aren't we, with it?
Here at St Helier Hospital, extra drinks for patients to keep them hydrated were being delivered. Dahlia was one who was relieved to have a regular supply brought to her bed.
There's always cold water for it, and they put ice cubes in there. When they change it and put ice cubes in, lollies, ice creams.
But dealing with the heat is very difficult. The buildings predate the start of the NHS in 1948. There's no air conditioning.
As we're standing here now, this actual prefab building, it's a bit like a greenhouse. So it's additional temperatures, despite all of the windows and us trying to do everything in our power to reduce the temperature. Staff needs to be continuously hydrated, our patients have to be hydrated, so tiring very, very easily in these extreme temperatures.
It's the middle of the day and it's already 30 degrees here in A&E. The heat has added to the extreme pressure seen in units like this and increased the strain on staff.
Hi, so another busy day.
Doctors here are concerned that based on previous experience, a heat wave can store up problems which last more than a few days.
The impact of heat on long-term conditions lasts for many days, even when the temperature has dropped. So we're anticipating an increased number of admissions and attendances today, but we will continue to see the impact on our services of this heat wave for 10 to 14 days forward.
Let's get in some for the 6th floor in or the corner.
Ice lollies were free for staff at the hospital and some were also taking them up for patients.
They're complaining a lot that it's very hot and stuff. The windows are fully open, but ice lollies will treat them.
NHS England said almost all services had continued to run, but they know that tomorrow will bring more heat and further challenges and pressures. Cupim, BBC News at St Helier Hospital, South London.
Well, we're being warned that climate change means these sorts of extreme temperatures will happen more regularly. Periods of intense heat do occur within natural weather patterns, but scientists say they're becoming more frequent, more intense and are lasting longer. Our climate editor Justin Roller is here. Justin.
Thanks, Fiona. So first off, as much of the country endures record temperatures, the obvious question is, why is it so hot? Well, that's simple. Southerly winds are bringing hot air up from Africa, which is helping drive the brutal heat waves Spain, Portugal and France have been enduring. Now, those same southerly winds have now brought that blistering heat here to the UK. And what makes it worse is a weather system called a heat dome. It sits like a lid on a pot, look at that, over Europe, held in place by a high pressure system. The sun heats it, but the air remains stuck within the dome, so it's pushed back down to the parched earth, raising temperatures higher and higher.
We're not ruling out further heat waves. Continental Europe is very hot at the moment, and the northern hemisphere is really hot. There's heat waves in the United States, heat waves in China, and it's certainly looking like this summer's going to be much warmer, and we're going to see a lot less precipitation than we usually see.
How does this compare with the past? 1976 is perhaps the UK's most famous heat wave. Temperatures hit almost 36 degrees, so lower than today, but the hot weather went on for days and days. And extreme heat is getting more common. Of the top 10 hottest days since the Victorian era, when records began, 7 are in the last 20 years. So what about the future? Well, first off, we don't yet know what this summer still has in store for us. The Met Office says it hasn't ruled out the possibility of more heat waves this year. But climate scientists say we can certainly expect more heat waves in the years to come. Here is how hot the Earth is now. Look at that. A little more than 1 degree over what it was before the industrial era began and we started burning all those fossil fuels. That pink blush shows the hottest areas. Now this is what the world would look like at 2 degrees of warming. Now look how much hotter much of it already is, particularly northern regions. At the moment, the world is on track to get a bit hotter than this if countries stick to the commitments they've made to cutting emissions. So what happens if they don't stick to their carbon cutting promises? Well, if the world does nothing at all, the worst case scenario, this is how things would look. Temperatures are 4 degrees above pre-industrial levels, and look how much more of the whole world is significantly hotter now. Well, all this hot weather has prompted Prince Charles to comment today. He says it shows why cutting carbon emissions is so vitally important. As I've tried to inculcate for quite some time, he says, the climate crisis really is a genuine emergency and tackling it is utterly essential. Fiona.
Justin, thank you. Well, Europe is also experiencing the fierce heat wave with extreme temperatures and wildfires burning in countries across the continent. Blazes in Spain, Portugal and Greece have forced thousands of people to evacuate and scorched huge swathes of land. And an apocalypse of heat is how officials in France are describing the situation there, with large wildfires burning in the southwest, as our Europe correspondent Jessica Parker reports.
Into the forest and the front line of an exhausting battle. One that today we were able to witness.
Up in the woods you can see guys tackling the fires. There's a huge amount of activity down here and it is hot, it is smoky. Just look at the haze in the trees.
The smoke thickens the further in we go, the flames suddenly all too apparent.
Plusieurs reprises, donc on est obligé de vraiment faire attention. The fire rekindles in many places. We have to be very careful with these conditions. We're in a pine forest. The vegetation is so dry here, and with the temperatures, the fire reaches the top of the trees very quickly. Flames reach up to 80 meters high. Donc on se retrouve avec des flammes qui peuvent faire plus de 80 mètres de haut.
Along here we were due to reach an evacuated campsite by the coast, but we never got there. Things were getting worse. You could see it on the ground and in the sky. Water bombers, one after the other, flying over our heads. They never stop here, they can't, but soon we, along with others, are told it's time to leave. Back on the main road, the thousands of evacuations were plain to see. Smoke means for many it's just not safe to stay. Here at this centre you can at least take a moment to cool down.
It was very smoky this morning. It's very bad for the lungs. I knew there were problems coming, so I prepared a grab bag. Even the medications for my dogs were ready to go.
For some it's a matter of frantic phone calls to find a place to sleep tonight. Who knows when they'll get to go home.
It can be in a few days, it can be in a few weeks. It's very difficult now to say, but we'll try to make people come back to their house as soon as possible.
France's wildfires seen from above are an alarming sight. Winds and over 40-degree heat made for a destructive mix today. Temperatures are set to drop tomorrow, and for these men, that can't come soon enough. Jessica Parker, BBC News in Gironde.
Let's just show you these dramatic pictures from northwest Spain. Alarming scenes for passengers on board a train in Zamora this morning. Their journey came to a halt with flames on either side of the tracks. Fortunately, the train managed to continue on its way. There's plenty more information on the heatwave on BBC News Online, including the latest travel advice, how hot it is where you are, and tips on staying cool. Head to bbc.co.uk/news, or you can use the BBC News app. The time is 6:20. Our top story this evening.